dear distinguished guests and organizers of the conference, thank you for the invitation. Yesterday it was so wonderful to see the pictures of the two little Hungarian-Israeli girls, Ella and Daphne, hugging their mother, Mayan, for the first time in 50 days after the Simchat Torah massacre. My colleague, assistant editor-in-chief of Hetek, Máté Kulifai, contacted Mayan for the first time from Hungary, and he met her afterwards in Israel. She got just one picture of the girls from Gaza, showing that they are alive, but no other news. Mayan asked our readers to keep up the memory of the children, helping not to get it fade during the long weeks of waiting. We prayed and hoped for their return as well, we pray and hope for the safe return of the other hostages taken by the terrorists. As a journalist, I had the privilege to visit Israel for the first time exactly 30 years ago. It was a memorable journey just a few years after the re-establishment of the diplomatic relations between Hungary and the State of Israel. These years seemed to be an era of new beginnings in both countries. In Hungary, after the fall of communism, we had been looking forward to start a new chapter in our 1,000-year-old history, including opening up a friendly relationship towards Israel in the Middle East, where more than 200,000 Hungarian-born citizens and their families are living. And in Israel, we could feel not only the natural Israeli optimism, but also the hope for a new beginning after the signing of the Oslo agreements in Washington that offered a timetable to solve the Israeli-Arab conflict, including the most difficult issues like the permanent status of Jerusalem. We remember we have been promised that even after the final status agreement will be settled by not later than the end of this century. I mean the end of the last century, not the next one. Many visits have followed that first one in 1993. Some have been really uplifting, especially the big conference called Jerusalem We Forget You Not, that Hungarian and German Christians organized for 5,000 participants, commemorating the 3,000th anniversary of Jerusalem as the capital of the ancient Jewish state, and to call for the international recognition of Jerusalem as the eternal and undividable capital of the modern state of Israel. And here I want to thank the organizers of this conference for including Dr. Jürgen Bühler and me in the same panel, at least virtually, not only because we know each other very well, but also because I remember that we have been inspired by the vision of the International Christian Embassy Jerusalem that was founded by the late Johann Lückhoff in 1980. It was the same year that the Israeli Knesset passed the basic law to officially declare Jerusalem as the eternal and undividable capital of Israel. There followed a total international rejection of the decision. The UN Security Council condemned it as well and ruled the law null and void in its resolution 478. And this is just one of the total 226 resolutions adopted by the UN Security Council against Israel, not to speak of the countless other votes and statements of the General Assembly, the Human Rights Council, and other international bodies. Some years ago, I had the honor to translate the former Israeli UN ambassador Doris Gold's great book on the issue, The Fight for Jerusalem, into Hungarian. And Ambassador Gold fittingly called the UN as the modern Tower of Babel. Regrettably, no nations, including the United States, the strongest ally of Israel, acknowledged Jerusalem at that time. However, a group of Dutch, German, and South African evangelical Christian pastors and activists decided to establish the International Christian Embassy Jerusalem as a declaration that Christians should honor the Bible in this respect as well. No other city has ever been mentioned in the Bible as the capital of Israel, only Jerusalem, since King David captured the city. And no other country as the land of Israel, only Eretz Israel. And thanks to President Trump, who made the right decision to move the American embassy to Jerusalem, now we can see that nations start slowly accept the historical and national truth, including Hungary, that has recently opened a diplomatic commercial department in Jerusalem. Hopefully the moving of the embassy will soon follow. There were other memorable visits as well. In 2004, I had the privilege to accompany the founder and senior pastor of Faith Church, the largest European evangelical Christian church, Reverend Sándor Németh, to Jerusalem. Pastor Nemeth had been invited by the late Benny Elon, who served as tourism minister at that time. Minister Elon had also Hungarian origins, and he was from the city of Papa. And I remember that he greeted us in his Jerusalem office, saying in Hungarian that I am a boy from Papa. He explained that he would like to create an alliance of European Christian friends of Israel, including pastors, politicians, public figures, and activists. From the members of national parliaments, parliamentary caucuses would be formed, he explained. Pastor Nemeth told Mr. Elon that he thinks that Bible-believing Christians should abandon the so-called replacement theology of the Roman Catholic Church and of some Protestant denominations. Instead, Christians should heed to the promise and warning that God has given to Abraham, saying, I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse those who curse you, and in you all the families of the earth will be blessed. They agreed, and it was the beginning of the Israel Alliance Foundation that operates today in dozens of parliaments in European countries, including Hungary, and in other parts of the world. The annual list of top 50 Christian friends of Israel that regularly appears during the Feast of Tabernacles in Jerusalem Post is published by Israeli Alliance Foundation, led today by Chairman Josh Reinstein. It was during this visit that Minister Elon organized a tour for us at Ir David, the city of David. This archaeological site of the ancient Jerusalem had been fairly unknown even for Israelis at that time. By the way, the young historian who guided us through the tombs of the kings, the Ezekiel tunnel, and the Siloam pool was Major Doron Spielman, who is currently serving in reserves as an IDF international spokesman in Israel's Swords of Iron war with Hamas. We have agreed with Mr. Elon that Hungarian Christians would visit the city of David and other sites as well that are deeply connected to the history of the Jewish people in the land, such as the ancient Tel Shiloh and Hebron. Educational and academic programs have also been started to inform Christians and non-Christians alike about the unbroken continuity of the Jewish history connecting the biblical and the modern Israel. But Professor Grill is a much more relevant expert about these programs. You may ask, as many people do ask, that why are certain Christians, evangelical, Pentecostals, and other denominations are so interested in supporting Israel? Okay, they don't believe in the replacement theology that teaches that false doctrine that God has rejected the Jewish people because they killed Jesus and transferred all the biblical promises of the patriarch and the prophets to the church. This is nice, but don't they have a special agenda that requires the Jewish state maybe as a springboard to jump to the next stage in the end-time prophecies? Don't they believe that there should be an Armageddon war before the millennial kingdom, and they want to speed it up in some way? What do these Christian Zionists want? Since we know that Zionism is a movement of the Jewish people returning to their ancient homeland. Not even all Jews agree with it, but what do Christians do with it? Do they also want to move to Israel? That would be a national disaster, as there are 2 billion Christians all over the world. That's an even bigger number than the global Muslim population. And we know that many of them really want to take the land from the river to the sea, as they like to chant with those anti-Zionists, or to say in less PC way, with those Jew-hating, anti-Semitic, useful idiot Westerners like Roger Waters or Greta Thunberg, just to name a few of the many. I think that these are relevant worries. Sometimes Christians really behave in an embarrassing way, as if they have an identity problem and are not able to decide who really they want to be, Christians or Jews. We might call it a religious gender issue, but maybe that would lead us too far. However, it is fair to say that Christian Zionism is a controversial expression that is difficult to define. But regardless the name tag, it is undeniable that some Bible scholars or Bible-reading laymen discovered from scriptures that there should be a return of the Jewish people to the land and boldly proclaimed it. Some of them were very prominent people, like US President John Adams, who wrote in 1818, "I really wish the Jews again in Judea an independent nation." Or George Bush, not one of the presidents, but the old George Bush, a professor of the Hebrew language at the New York University and a cousin of an ancestor of the President Bush, who published a book titled The Valley of Vision, or The Dry Bones of Israel Revived. Or we might mention the author Herman Melville, who expressed this idea in a poem on pilgrimage in the Holy Land, that was the title, with these words: "The Hebrew seers announced in time the return of Judah to her prime." And there were archaeologists, mostly unprofessional amateurs of the 19th century, who started to dig up Jerusalem, looking also for the proofs of the Bible and of the Jewish history. We might say these people had been Zionists before Theodor Herzl. Yes, some of them believed that the Jews would eventually become Christians after the return, or believed that this or that nation is one of the 10 lost tribes, and had other strange ideas. But many of them loved the Jewish people genuinely and without any self-interest. And they were right in this hope, as the birth of the State of Israel in 1948 and the unification of Jerusalem after the Six-Day War became the final nails in the coffin of the old replacement theology. These historic events prove clearly that the ancient promises and prophecies are still valid for the Jewish people. As a result, today there are tens of millions of Christians all over the world, not only in the States, but in Latin America, Southeast Asia, and even in the tiny oceanic island nations that are so committed to vote for Israel in the UN, who love Israel. These Christians support Israel. They visit Israel. They defend Israel on the social platforms that are the frontline battlefields today. And there are a lot of Jewish people, both in Israel and in the diaspora, who realize that they have an alliance and a true friendship with these Christians, as we could see in the recent weeks after the bloody and barbaric pogrom on Simchat Torah. A moving demonstration was held just 3 days after the massacre at the bank of the Danube in Budapest at the Shoe Memorial of the Jews shot to death to the river during the last months of the Shoah. And yes, we have a common enemy. The jihadists, the radical Islam, wants to annihilate Jews and the Christians in order to create a global caliphate. And that's why we need each other, even if we have different approaches in certain questions. But there are much more that connects us, and I'm really thankful for this conference in Budapest, because this is exactly such a forum for strengthening these bonds that unite us. Thank you for your attention.
Just a little point to demonstrate the complexity of the situation between religions, between Jews, especially between Orthodox Jews and Christians in Israel, is with a remark to Mr. Morvay presentation about Minister Benny Elon, because this minister, Benny Elon, is a practicing Orthodox Jew. He's also a settler. He's also a right-wing person. So in theory, you might expect that he will be against Christians in Israel, but the fact was the opposite, because he was not only encouraging your group, but he was actually organizing all the pro-Israeli Christian groups working all around the world. So the fact that an Orthodox Jew and a settler and a right wing will be so cooperative with people who are religiously opposite to his views on how a person should behave shows how complex this situation is, and how we shouldn't judge a person only by his title, by the fact that he's an Orthodox Jew, by the fact that he's practicing Judaism, by the fact that he is right-wing, by the fact that he's a settler. So, in fact, he could be very friendly with many people who have different beliefs than himself. So, thank you.
May I? Yes, of course. Yes, I do agree that, and I think it is a very promising sign that people would if you just read the newspapers, it would look like they are sitting on the different sides of the table, but still they are able to find common courses. And today it is the case after the October 7 massacre that we can see that in Europe, for example, just like the elections in the Netherlands, there was a reaction from the voters that they supported politicians who I know have been regarded and written about, even in Israel, just like an extreme right-wing problematic figure. But still, he's speaking something, he's speaking very, very friendly about Israel, not only now, but for decades. I know Geert Wilders for a long time, and I know that he's been sacrificing practically all of his life for the mission he does, and people reacted to that. So I think we should not judge by the mainstream media or by the old categories. And just to give another example, there's been we have been talking about the Christians living in Israel and in the territories. Unfortunately, many of them are anti-Zionist, anti-Israel, and we could see that the old replacement theology has been fading away. But instead of that, there has been a new replacement theology, the Palestinianism, which teaches that Israel has no historical roots to the land, has no historical roots to Jerusalem, even not to the Temple Mount. And we can see it in the international bodies that UNESCO regularly publishes papers that forget to mention any Jewish connections to the Temple Mount. Of course, you're from Jerusalem, you know it very, very well. Just to explain that, and unfortunately, many of the Arab Christians just share those views. So I agree with you. The situation is very complex. We should not be quick to draw conclusions. We should focus on the people and on the message and on the actions.